Okay, let's just mute everybody. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to How to Sell When Nobody's Buying. And my goal today is to ex effectively help you sell more, meet your goals, meet your revenue goals, as well as explain our system, which will help you attract and convert more clients. So, just in the chat, tell me why you're here and what you'd like to get out of today. Just put a couple of lines into the chat if you could, just so we make sure that we're all on the same page. To grow a pipeline, says Patrick. Yep. How can we help speed up the sales process? That's always a good one, especially in the times that we seem to be sitting in at the moment. I don't know what I don't know. Yep. Okay. Intelligent person and always listen to people, and I can pick a different opinion. Okay, excellent. All right, good. All right. So we've now got used to using the chat, so let's just keep using the chat if we could. So tell me if you can see that. Okay. All right. So the first key really is to say, okay, why are you here? And is this a reality that you're facing at the moment? So right now, there's an economic slowdown. We all know there's an economic slowdown. There's a lot of uncertainty, given what's happening in the Middle East, given what's happening with the budget. There's a lot of fear, I guess. People are making decisions. Things have really slowed down. And I don't know if you've noticed any of that. And on the other side, there's increased competition. Uh, there are more and more entrants into the market. And because a lot of cases, because of AI, is on the surface making things easier for people to enter a market. And that's not necessarily the reality going down the track, but people think that it's really easy to be in business. And therefore, there's more and more increased competition. And because there's increased competition, people start looking at you as a commodity. And if you can't differentiate yourself really effectively, then the only thing that people can differentiate you on is price. And the minute people differentiate on price, it's a race to the bottom because people just keep undercutting you and then nobody makes any profit. And that's not really a good way to run a business. And because of all of this, I don't know about you, but I think most of us find ourselves working harder and harder. And when we do have conversations with prospects, sometimes they're good conversations. They seem to be good. And at some point they say, "Oh, look, send me a proposal," and then nothing. They go quiet, they ghost you, or all of a sudden it's not a priority anymore, and you wonder what the hell is going on. And so, while on the surface the pipeline might look good, if we don't have enough people coming into the pipeline, and if the conversion rate isn't adequate, and I'll talk about conversion rate in a minute, a lot of deals basically stall, and they very often seem to stall at the last minute for some reason. But the reality is, it's what you do in the beginning that makes all the difference. And the deal basically falls down, believe it or not, in the beginning, not at the end. And because of all of this, uh, revenue is unpredictable, and especially in professional services where we get a project, we do a project, and then we get really busy and we forget to do any sort of marketing and you're basically seeing everything that you've got in your marketing, and you forget you're doing your marketing, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so just put in the chat if you can relate to any of that. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you find the current economic circumstances, and how difficult are you finding it to attract new clients? Just put something in the chat. Okay, so 9 out of 10 for attracting new clients at the minute. So you're finding that difficult, are you, Patrick? Yep.
Sorry. Yes, yeah. For all the reasons you say, AI is threatening our business, or not. It kind of is and it isn't, but people think buyers think that it is more than it actually is, because the the big guys are touting that it's going to save the world and do everything. So every time Sam Altman opens his mouth, or every big media release that goes out, because the big guys are pumping billions in, then everyone's buying it and thinks it's a silver bullet. And equally, the economic climate seems to be making clients nervous.
Okay, no, fair enough. Okay. So here's the other thing. We all have a lot of expertise and we get great results. But I don't know about you, but in a lot of cases with founders, the revenue depends on the founder. And I've spoken to a lot of people who've hired a salesperson at sometimes what I consider to be ridiculously high base salaries, like around $200,000 a year. And these people have very often come out of an enterprise sort of environment and they're working with a small to medium business. And a year goes by and they haven't sold anything. And then they start walking out the door, having taken their base salary, leaving the founder absolutely dependent on wondering why nothing has ever happened. And part of what we do when we work with clients is to say you've got to have a cohesive system for bringing in clients and then converting them. And what happens though is that because a lot of companies are founder-led, it's the founder that's doing most of the selling, but they're doing it basically off their own bat. They don't have an actual system. So when somebody else comes in, there's no way of actually duplicating what you do. And there's no way of actually scaling the business. And then a lot of other people say to me, oh, look, I get all my business through referrals. And that's fine until it's not. Because if you're just looking for referrals, you're effectively leaving your business growth in the hands of somebody else. Because unless you can have a mechanism that actively generates a pipeline, actively helps you convert, you're basically handing over your business to someone else, and that's not a good way of doing things because referral partners move on, people die, people retire, and it's just not a predictable way of doing things. So when we talk to people, we say, okay, so there is a level of what I'd call flawed thinking. And the flawed thinking is thinking you have a lead generation problem. But the real problem, and yes, to a certain extent, everybody does have a lead generation problem, unless you've got copious quantities of leads coming in. But the real issue is not necessarily getting leads into the pipeline, it's converting those leads. Because the average conversion rate for a professional services, SaaS company, professional services company, believe it or not, is only 2.5% on average, on average. And by that, I mean someone coming in the pipeline absolutely cold to converting into a client, that's the average conversion rate. It- If you have, I talk to people and they say, oh, my conversion rate is 1 in 3, 1 in 4, or even 1 in 2. Okay. And that would happen if you've positioned yourself as the preeminent supplier, if you've got a really good referral where somebody has endorsed you really heavily, where somebody has been watching your content, reading your content, probably for 8 or 9 or 10 or 15 hours, and they've really got to know you. They've already made a decision that they work with you. Yes, then your conversion rate is going to be much, much higher. But from a cold conversion rate, it's around 2.5%. And that means that you're probably losing 97 to 100%, 97 out of 100 prospects that you're actually bringing into the funnel. So increasing the conversion rate is one of the greatest leverage points that you can have. Now I'm going to show you a little calculator here. And let's just say that your average price per sale is $5,000 and you have 100 leads in your pipeline and your base conversion rate is 2.5%. And it takes 90 days on average from somebody coming into your pipeline to closing the business. Your combined annual revenue would work out at 50,694. But watch what happens if you do a couple of things. Let's just take that up to say 5%. Your annual revenue just doubled. But if you take the time to close because you're more effective at your marketing and you're more effective at your sales conversion, down to say 60 days, watch what happens. If you increase the number of people in your funnel, watch what happens. So it just shows that increasing your conversion rate and reducing the time that it takes for somebody coming into the funnel to actually convert has a much greater effect than most people actually think. So my goal today is effectively to help you increase your conversion rate and show you how possibly we could help you do that. And just give me an idea in the chat what you would like to achieve from your business, where you are now and where you would like to get in 12 months' time. What sort of difference would that make to you? Okay, so Fiona, aiming for 100% growth, double your business and then sell out. Okay, fair enough. In what sort of time frame, Keith? And Patrick, when you say double your pipeline value as improved conversion rate, what do you reckon it's sitting on at the moment?
Um, well, our kind of we have a metric that sort of takes our blended pipeline value, which is sitting at about a mil at the moment, just over a mil.
Hmm.
And that's obviously that's a blended percentage based on likely work to win.
Okay. And you want to double that?
Mm,
You want to double that to 2 million?
yeah.
And what's the conversion rate do you reckon you have?
Well, it seems to be dwindling. Like I'd have said historically, and again, it depends at what point in the pipeline you measure, but historically, once we got a client to proposal stage, probably 2, 3 years ago, we were winning about 50% of clients once we got them to proposal stage. That's probably now dropped to maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 5.
Hmm. Okay. And what do you put that down to?
A lot of the reasons that you talked about on your first slide, AI is making it's creating a bit of a race to the bottom question around pricing, and clients are sort of feeling like they can get things done cheaper.
Okay. All right. Okay. Interesting, isn't it? And Keith, you'd like to retire tomorrow. Fair enough. Fiona, how about you?
So we are bringing on quite a few new staff over the next couple of months, and so we've got some quite aggressive sales targets, which is to effectively over the next 24 months, we're tripling revenue. So we're not entirely professional services. We're a software with
Mhm.
professional services that is aiding a change transformation. But I still think it's quite relevant to us. So yeah, it's definitely we're doing enterprise sales, so it's the speed to conversion. We're pretty good at conversion, but they take a long time, and we really want to speed up the sales cycle. Is probably the big lever we want to pull.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Good. All right. A little bit about me because I don't think, besides Adrian, none of you know who I am. Obviously, my name's Rashid. I have an engineering background. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. I spent 20 years in IT. I was the Unix specialist for a number of companies and then moved into sales and then project management and leadership for people like NCR and DEC, Perkin-Elmer, who don't exist anymore, Unisys, who certainly does, and then DMR Group, who became Fujitsu. And one of the things that happened in my career was in around 2000, we had the dot-com, and the company I was working for basically tried to get venture capital and failed. And we basically shut up shop. And then Barbara Swatter, my wife, who was sitting up in the corner of the screen there, and I decided that we would start a practice, Revealed Resources, with the aim of basically business coaching and helping people sell more. Now, the interesting thing about starting a business, as any of you know, is that it is quite a slog. And when we started, we both come out of professional corporate environments. Barbara was relatively new to the country, and we watched the bank balance go down. And at some point, Barbara said, "Well, look, we need to get part-time jobs." And so I said, "Look, what are we going to do?" And we decided that we would go and clean houses. And so the interesting thing with this is that one day I was cleaning the house for a managing director of a small subsidiary of a large organization. And we got chatting, and I said, "Look, we're running this practice. We've only started recently, etc." A couple of weeks later, I went and saw him, had a chat, put him on my newsletter list. A year went by, and he'd got a newsletter from me once a week, every week. And he rang me up and he said, "Oh, Rashid, I'd like your help. We've got a major sales problem. Can you come and talk to us?" At that point, he was doing about $3 million a year in revenue, and he wanted to get up to about 10. After working with him, we got him up to about $11.5 million a year. Now, the interesting thing is not so much that we got him up to 11.5, which is a great result, but getting him as a client was a pure fluke because we had no system for our own strategy, how we get clients, how our own marketing. We were good at sales, but we had no system to get people in the door in the first place. And that got me to realize that marketing was really where it was at, because you can be really good at sales, but if you can't get people in the door to actually talk to in the first place, and marketing does the heavy lifting, then you are leaving things up to random chance. And this was purely random chance. And so that got us on the journey to putting together a system, which I'm going to describe today. Now, obviously, I've only got a limited amount of time and we can only scratch the surface. So what I am offering everybody today is a complimentary 60-minute pipeline review where we sit down and go deeper into where you're at, what you want to achieve, and I can draw up a map, which I'll demonstrate to you in a minute, as to how we could possibly help you, but you could also just take that away and implement it yourself. There's no obligation to work with us further, obviously, but it's our way of saying thank you. And also, to be frank, getting to know each other to see whether there is something that we can do together. So let's just talk about a couple of the clients that we work with. So the first one was Gulsa, which was the gentleman who went from 3 to 11.5 million. Right Group is an interesting one because they are a property buyers agency. They only do residential property. Well, they just started with commercial, but they mainly do residential property, but as a wealth creation strategy. So they don't attract people who just want to buy one property to live in. They create wealth through property, and they just won the buyers agency of the year a couple of weeks ago. And we've been working with them on and off for over 20 years. And they credit us with putting together their sales as well as their marketing systems and their positioning. Another one which is really quite interesting is Pixel Perfect, because Pixel Perfect used to develop photographs for professional photographers. They only worked with the photographic trade. And when we first got to know them, they had this massive laser printer. It was literally the size of a small truck sitting in a back room. $500,000 back in those days. And their whole thing was that they were a technical company, and their whole thing was about color management. What the photographer took as a photograph came out exactly on the print. And we kept saying to them, "You're not a technical company. What you are is a marketing company. You've got to really get good at sales and understand what it is that your clients are really looking for." what is it? How are you going to make their lives easier? And what's interesting there is that once they realize that and they put in the mechanisms and the systems to actually market and sell more effectively, the owner sold the business a few years ago, which he thought was never going to be possible. I'll talk about a couple of the other ones a bit later. So I want to talk a second about the three with our framework. And we call it the 3P framework and I'm going to talk about that and say for obvious reasons. Is this thing working or not? That's better. Okay. So I want you to look at this framework from two angles. One angle is it's going to give you a sense of exactly how we would work with a client and how we would help a client improve their strategy, their marketing, and their sales. But I want you to look at it also from another angle. When you can explain what you do to a client using a model such as this, it is much easier for somebody to understand what it is you do and what it is that they get. Because the old picture paints 1,000 words is very true. We can write about it, but when somebody actually sees the framework, it is much easier for them to understand what it is you do, what it is that they get. So when we look at the framework, there are three core areas that we work with. And the first core area starts with your strategy. And your strategy is all about the problems that you solve. Because if there are no problems, no one's going to buy anything. So you have to really get clear as to what are the problems that you solve. And you have to get very clear as to who you solve these problems for. And once you're clear as to what the problem is that you solve, you then have to obviously market yourself. And the goal of marketing is basically to attract people into your orbit. And the better that you can market yourself, the easier it is for somebody to make a decision that they're going to buy from you. And the goal of marketing is effectively to position yourself. Because if you position yourself as the preeminent supplier, the specialist, you will always make more money than the generalist. The specialist doctor always makes more money than the GP. And by being positioned correctly, people talk about you because it's much more important. It's not so much that who you know, it's who knows you. And if people know you as the expert because of your positioning in the marketplace, that is the way that they're attracted to you in the first place. And then once you're positioned correctly, the final piece obviously is to be able to is sales. And sales is all about the promise that you make. The promise that you make to your market. So what is the promise that you actually make to your market? What are they going to actually get? What are they looking for? What are the problems that they have? What are the outcomes that they're looking to get? And when we break this down a little bit, strategy and the problems, you need to know three things. The first thing you need to obviously know is what is your expertise? What is your particular IP? Because the interesting with IP is that expertise is that there are going to be a lot of people in your marketplace with your particular expertise. What differentiates you in your marketplace is what is your experience, and then what are your values and belief? What is your essence as a person? Because those three things will differentiate yourself. And once we know what your IP is, we can say, okay, what problems do we actually solve and who do we solve these problems for? Because then the next section that you look at is what is your market? So who are you solving these problems for? And the key here is to say, okay, narrow down the market so that the market itself, when they're listening to you, when they're talking to you, think that, you understand them better than anybody else. Because we all think we're unique, we're not, but when you're dealing with a particular vertical, then you know what the problems are with that vertical. You know what the outcomes are that they want. You can then provide insights as to how they can improve what they're doing. And the final piece of the marketing piece, of the strategy piece, is traffic. Because it's all very well to say that you've got a particular market, but if you can't actually get in front of them, economically, that means how much money, time, investment do you have to spend to get in front of them? Where are these people? So you won't be able to actually build a business. So you've got to know these three things. And by doing that, what happens is that you can connect with a database and create a database of what we would call your ideal future client. So it's really important to be able to have your expertise there, have the market, have the traffic, and that allows you to build up a pipeline of people. So this is basically creating your pipeline of people. Let's see if this works. So when we come to marketing, let's see, that one works. There are three aspects to marketing. The first aspect is you have to know what the message is that you're going to send out to your market. The second thing you need to know is how you're going to attract them into your orbit. And the third thing is you've got to engage them. So think about how you buy anything. The chances are you're going to do your research. You're going to look at all the various options. You're going to see what the positioning of the person in the market is. You're going to be probably 60, 70, 80% down the funnel before you decide to even call a possible vendor. And that's the reality today. And so you need to have a mechanism for making sure that your message attracts the right people in the market that want to solve those particular problems. And once you've attracted them, you then need to engage them in some form with your content. And today, in the old days, we used to say, okay, it would take 7, 8, 9 touches for someone to become a client. Today, it might be 25 or 30 touches. But the other side of it is what we call brand width. And it's a bit of marketing jargon. But what it effectively means is that somebody is going to read your content, watch your videos, attend webinars, whatever it is, for 8 or 9 hours before they choose to even contact you on average. And therefore, it's really important that you have a great deal of material that constantly goes out there that talks to your specific market and talks about the problems that they have. And I didn't say talk about you, I said talk about them and their problems. And this is one of the things that people really get wrong, because when I analyze sales calls, and I do a lot of that, one of the first things we notice is the ratio of how much somebody talks to how much somebody listens. And very often it is the salesperson doing most of the talking, and they vomit all over their prospect, metaphorically, talking about themselves, talking about the solution, rather than figuring out what it is that the prospect really wants, what is the problem that they're trying to solve. Because there's the old thing, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And the better that a client feels, the prospect feels that you understand them, and that comes through the questions that you ask, the greater the level of trust that they're going to have that you could solve the problem. So the irony is the better the question, the better the solution is going to end up. So when it comes to engaging, what we want to basically do here is we want to cultivate the relationship. And we want to obviously put out information, but we also want to ask people whether they want to buy. And this is one thing that we see doesn't happen enough. We just put out content, and we never actually make an ask. And we see that also with salespeople. They have lots of meetings, coffee chats, this, that, and the other, but they never actually say, what are we going to do? Let's do it. What's stopping you from doing it now? So when it comes to sales, there are three aspects to sales. The first, once somebody has come into your orbit and they want to have a conversation with you, you have to diagnose what's actually happening in their circumstance. So comes down to the quality of the question. And the better you can diagnose and talk about the implications of not solving the problem, the easier it is to help someone buy. Because there's a misnomer in sales, and the misnomer is that we have to sell something. The reality is we all buy when we're ready to buy. And we as salespeople can't force somebody to buy something, or at least not force somebody and have it stick. You've got to be in a position where somebody wants to buy, and you've got to help them determine what the urgency and the priority is. Because ultimately, if something is not in the first couple of things where their priority list is, it could be important, but it's not an urgent priority. Something else will come in the way. And part of our role when we're dealing and helping salespeople and sales teams and owners and founders is to help them figure out, when speaking to a prospect, what is the actual priority here? Because nice to have is not money in the bank, and something else will always come in the way. And our job is to help people understand what are the implications of not taking action. What is the cost, both in time, money, emotional cost, whatever it is, of not taking action? And then because we're working with hopefully a relatively narrow vertical or verticals, we understand not only their business, but we also have other clients that we've helped in those businesses. And we can say, look, what you think is the real problem here is not really the problem. What the real problem is this over here, and this is how we help people solve it. And it's those insights that you give people as to what it is that's really going on in their business, because they are too close to it very often. And it's very difficult to see the jar, the label of the jar from inside the jar. And often being an outsider to a business, you can come in and say, well, that's pretty obvious. Why are you doing that? Or why are you doing that? That was pretty obvious that you need to do something different. And if you know how to do that, well, because you've done it with a number of different people, then it's easy to give people those insights. And then the final thing over here is you've obviously got to be able to demonstrate value. And the value is in two forms. There's the tangible value and the intangible value. And the tangible value is generally time, money, efficiency. The intangibles is how somebody feels. Now, we all know I'm sure you're familiar with the old saying, we buy on emotion and justify with logic. And that is still very, very true. It's the feeling that somebody gets. Yeah, by all means, take a screenshot. It's the feeling that somebody gets that actually gets them over the line. Now, the interesting thing with risk is most sales will fall down because somebody thinks it's a risky decision. And it may be a risky decision for the organization, but very often it's a risky decision for the person making the decision, the decision maker, or an influencer. And I've had a number of examples where I've spoken to people about this, and I've got a good friend. He works in manufacturing, and he's a very good consultant. And he put in a proposal to a large manufacturing organization, and he could have saved this manufacturing organization a significant amount of money by improving their processes. And he presented the proposal, and he said to me, he literally got walked out the door. And the reason was the plant manager was going to lose his junkets going to Europe every year to look at whatever he did at various trade shows if they implemented his solution. So even though it would have saved the company a huge amount of money, somebody making the decision kiboshed the deal. And I have seen that happen time and time again for various reasons. So you've got to understand what is the value that somebody wants. Now, that's the model that we use with our clients to help them figure out what their IP is, figure out what their market is, and how they're going to get traffic. And then, yes, we do use AI now to help you analyze that. We help you analyze your message, how you attract people, how you engage them. The diagnosis part is part of our sales process where we help you. We have a structured sales process where we help people go through so that it's like closing doors in a corridor. As you go through, you want to make sure that the door closes behind you so that your prospect can't go backwards. So that you understand what their objections are likely to be. You preempt these objections. You help them understand what it is that they're going to get and why they should work with you. Anybody got any questions about any of that? If you want to take a screenshot, by all means, take a screenshot. But I've got one here. I'll probably take a screenshot of that. You're better off with that one. So tell me if you want that, and otherwise I'll move on. All right, so moving on. We've talked about strategy and the problems, and we talked about the promise and the value. But here's the thing. We can do all of this in isolation. And frankly, that would be, in my experience, a mistake because what we think and what they think are not necessarily aligned. And by asking your potential clients, as well as your clients, as well as people that you've lost deals from or lost deals with, what their experience is actually key to growing your business. Because what they value and what we value may not be the same thing. And therefore, regular client conversations will unlock hidden revenue. And that's why we run something called the hidden revenue diagnostic. And the hidden revenue diagnostic is where we actually ring clients, your clients, on behalf of you, and ask a very comprehensive series of questions. It's a full-on interview where we find out what's really going on, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in the first time we did this over 25 years ago, we actually saved somebody's business doing this because they knew there were problems and they didn't know what the problems were. And we spoke to the senior executive team of this company that we're dealing with, and they told them, and they fixed it. And then we realized that this was something really valuable. So every time we work with a client on a longer term basis, we run the hidden revenue diagnostic where we sit down with generally senior people in organizations and ask them, what is it that they value? Why did they come? Why did they stay? What else could we sell them? How could we make their lives easier? What do they really value? What don't they value? And the interesting thing is, you're all familiar, I'm sure, with the 80-20 rule. So 20% of what you do gives you 80% of the result. It's the same thing here. Very often what we think is important is not important to them, but what we don't think is important is very important to them and vice versa. So by talking to your clients, you get really good actionable material. Now, the thing is, you can say, okay, well, I can talk to my clients. I don't need you, Rashid. And that's fine. You can. But let me put it this way. There is the third party rule. And the third party rule says we will tell the truth to somebody who is not emotionally involved. Classic example, you're walking past a restaurant, a bunch of restaurants, and you've got the spruiker outside saying, come into my restaurant. Happens a lot if you live in Melbourne. Uh, do you believe the spruiker? Chances are not. But somebody walking out of the restaurant and you say, oh, okay, what was that restaurant like? And they say it was fantastic. You're likely to believe them because you think they have no vested interest. So we talk to senior members of our clients' teams, the clients, to find out what's really going on. And I'll give you a couple of examples as to what we can actually find out. So we have a leadership coach who works with private schools, and he had a program that ran for about a year. It was $23,000 to run this program, and his whole thing was improving student outcomes. And I interviewed a number of these principals of large private schools, and I asked an obvious question. I said, well, what are the results? And they said, look, the results are fantastic, but we'd like the program to be longer because we don't think that we can get all of the results within a year. And I said, how long do you reckon you want? They said 3 years. I said, are you willing to pay for it? And they said, yes. So we took the $23,000 to a $75,000 program. And we then found that there were smaller schools which couldn't afford the whole enchilada, and we could hive off a $25,000 service just for them. So that was one example. A more recent example is an engineering consultant. He does a lot of work for larger consultancies. He's got a PhD in airflow design and water flow design, that sort of area. And the larger consultancies would work with end developers for multi-story buildings and car parks. And our client would do the work for the engineering consultancy, who would then pass the work on to the end client. And I said, okay, so how much work are you actually giving him out of all of the work? Because some of them said, oh, look, we're thinking of doing this in-house. And I said, well, we give him about 15%. I said, what would stop you giving him more work? And he said, well, one of the issues is the way he bills. He gives us the work, we check the work over, we pass the work, but he invoices the end client, the developer. I said, really? What would happen if he just you white labeled his service, he invoiced you, and you marked it up and did whatever else you wanted to do? And they said, oh, we'd give him about 85 to 90%. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Another client of mine, share advisory. We've been working with him about 12 years, 13 years, and we regularly interview his clients to find out, what he's doing, how he's doing. One client, and this staggered me. The client said that he'd actually saved him $1 million in fees, just in fees, and got him a 30% return on the millions of bucks that he had invested. Now, by doing these interviews, we get case studies and we get testimonials as well. Now, you use those case studies and testimonials to get another 5 new clients, each with $500,000 to invest. So those are the sorts of results that we can get from actually interviewing your clients. But there's another interesting thing. So Michael Sokalis is a client of ours, and he runs about a 35 person company. His major clients are mining companies, Rio Tinto, PowerLink, all of those sorts of people. I interviewed a number of senior executives, and one said that he'd actually passed Michael over for a big deal because he didn't realize that Michael actually did a certain service, which ironically was Michael's core services. The client didn't know. And therefore, the deal went to one of the big fours. The other thing that came out of these interviews was that Michael wasn't actually dealing with the executive level the way he should have been. He should have been going up a couple of levels, and he wasn't. He was being pigeonholed. Now, he didn't know that. He only found that out because I made the phone calls and had these interviews. Another client, Cameron Fairburn from Praxim Cyber, he realized, he suspected that some of his clients thought that he was key man and that if he left the organization, the service wouldn't continue. And sure enough, a number of his clients brought this up with me and said, okay, this is something that we're concerned about. And Cameron said to me, look, I know my clients, I talk to them constantly, but this still brought up stuff that I didn't know or I suspected. But the other side of it is that, and we've always found this, clients really appreciate, your clients really appreciate that somebody else actually asked for their opinion. They value the fact that somebody asked, and they will tell somebody external the truth. They'll say, oh, they did something, didn't really think that was their crash hard. They may not tell you. And the interesting thing is that people have very long memories. I've had cases where something had gone wrong years before, and the person I'm dealing with tells me that, oh, this thing happened. Sure enough, their clients will remember and bring it up and say, yes, okay, it was fixed. So that is one of the key reasons we suggest running the hidden revenue diagnostic and that's something that I'm happy to talk to you about if you'd like me to down the track. So moving on, let's talk about the prospect engagement spectrum. There are 4 types of prospects, and most of us neglect the easiest one to sell to. It's the classic, would you like more fries? Your existing clients are the easiest people to get more business out of because they already know you, they like you and trust you, and they know that you do a good job. But the point is, they won't actually offer something, they won't actually buy something more from you unless you tell them what else you can do for them. And that's when I speak to them with the hidden revenue diagnostic. I put other products and services to them. And I say, what else would you like? And oh, could you do that? It's interesting. The other side of this is it also gives you information. So the diagnostic, I'll give you another example of what I think about. Dealing with a company that do industrial weather stations, and we're talking for feedlots, agriculture, mining companies. A weather station might be $30,000, $40,000. So we're not talking something you buy in Bunnings. And when I interviewed a number of these clients, and I said, okay, so why do you buy this? Guy who does agriculture said, if I have to drive 25 kilometers with a full tank of stuff that I'm going to spray, I need to know what the weather is doing on a minute by minute basis. What is the wind direction? Because I can't take the risk that something is going to spray onto a neighbor's field. So for me, this is all about risk reduction. And it was the same thing with a number of other types of industries. It was all about risk reduction. And nowhere in this client's marketing or sales activity did they talk about risk reduction. And so we said, okay, this is something that really needs to come to the fore. And that would only have come out because of the client interviews. And so when you're talking to your existing clients, what else can you sell them? It's like the leadership coach who went from $23,000 to $75,000. What about your past clients? People who've stopped working with you for any reason, whatever. They might have moved on. Maybe your project finished. If you don't go back to them on a regular basis with something that they might want or something that they could need, they will go somewhere else. I had an instance where somebody phoned me up one day and he said, oh, he'd been working with this client for 20 years and he delivered a whole bunch of stuff to the warehouse and he was looking around and he said, oh, what's that stuff in the corner? And the client said, oh, look, we bought this stuff. And he said, I could have done that. And they said, we didn't know. 20 years he'd been working with them. That was $50,000 that he missed out on because they didn't know. And then the third lot of warm leads, obviously, people that you have been cultivating up here. So these are the people you've been engaging with. These are the people you've been cultivating with. They are warm, but you've got to get them moving down the funnel and you've got to make some offers to them. And then the final people obviously are cold leads, and that's where the 2.5% comes in. And you've got to move the cold leads into getting them warmer. And this is where I think we see a lot of people fall down because it's a leaky bucket. A lot of people come into the funnel and they don't ever get contacted. They never get followed up. Uh, there's a frightening statistic that says if somebody makes an inquiry, every minute that goes past, they exponentially drop off. So if you can't deal with them within at least a few minutes to at least acknowledge that, every hour, every minute, every hour, every day that goes past, that lead gets colder and colder and colder. And then there's no point in constantly bringing new people into the funnel if your conversion rate is low, because then you're spending a lot of time, money, and effort by not spending the time and effort to convert them. So basically, stuff just leaks out of the funnel. So go back here. So once again, fortune is in the follow-up. It takes 20 to 25 contacts to success. And remember the brand width. The more time somebody spends with you, the more likely they are to become a client. So if we go back to our friends here at Kempi, Kempi is a Finnish welding company. They're a multinational welding company. And one Christmas, I got a phone call. And the managing director said, Rashid, I have to apologize. And I said, what do you need to apologize for? And he said, I've been on your newsletter list for 2 years. And basically, I've hit delete until I saw this one. We did some sales training. We then moved into a longer program over a year, and they became the second most profitable subsidiary after Germany. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. But the interesting thing was, it took 2 years of newsletter, 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 until he was ready to do something. And what I said in the message triggered something for him. So you just don't know when someone is going to be ready to do something. So effectively, wrapping up, if you're interested, and I'd invite you to take advantage of the pipeline review, diagnostic review. Drop a yes in the chat if you'd like me to give you a call, and I'll do that. And you can obviously take everything that I've told you and do it yourself, or you can get my help to put a system together to help you attract, cultivate, and convert high-value clients. So we're hitting the top of the hour. So look, I'll open it up to any questions that you have.
Hey Rashid, you obviously, like all good salespeople, present the clients and the case studies that you've had good success with. There must be some that there hasn't been such a good news story with. Would there be, because we've tried working with a few different, sales consultants and people in the past, and some have sort of ended up handing money back to us because they've said it's too, your business is too difficult. It's too generalist. It's not niche enough. Now we've been doing a lot of work over the last few years to try and niche down, and we run our business on a operating model called EOS. You might be familiar with
I
Entrepreneurial
know it.
Operating Scheme. So we've taken a lot of information from there to identify what our sort of key things are, what our sort of key hooks are, and things like that. We're doing more work at the moment on narrowing and further. But I guess, yeah, have you come across instances where you've worked with people and you haven't been able to help them?
Yeah, yeah. Look, absolutely. I'd be lying if I said if there was, everybody was a success story. Look, it comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to are you willing to take advice and then actually implement? Because people, I have had instances over the years where people have just said, yeah, 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 we want to do this, we want to do this, but they never actually take action and do it. And it's very hard to change course if you're not actually moving. So that would be the first thing. I don't work with e-commerce and people like that because that's just not my area of expertise. Okay.
Mm,
My area of expertise is the more strategic end of marketing. I used to write ads. I used to do all of that sort of stuff, but that's just becoming more and more. Running a Google ad is really a difficult thing to do these days. So my thing is, if we can get the strategy right, if we know exactly who you're targeting, what the message is for those people, why they would respond, what is the problem that they're facing, and can we enunciate the problem in a way that would get them to go, yes, these people understand the problem, therefore they're more likely to understand the solution. So yeah, I've had people who've done nothing.
mm,
I've had people who they've turned into therapy sessions. And I've realized that they're simply not, they can't be helped because they don't want to be helped.
yep, yep. Okay, thanks.
Fiona, anything?
Can I jump in here,
Yeah,
Patrick?
sure.
Rashid? That's actually one reason we're doing the diagnostics first, because that will tell us for much better whether we can actually help.
Yep.
And that's where we often, most of the time, start, because as someone once said, small hinges swing big doors. It may not be as complicated as it seems once you have heard back from your clients.
Mm. Yeah, we actually ran an activity 2 years ago where I interviewed and spoke to about 32 of our existing clients, past clients, and ones that got away, prospects. And yeah, I did a bit of an activity similar to what you've described. Obviously, it wasn't, we didn't have the third party sort of perspective on that. But I'd like to think, a lot of our clients and prospects are quite truthful in what they say. I've got a background in UX research as well, so I sort of know how to conduct an interview that isn't biased.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's fair enough. I'm not saying that, people can't do their own interviews. I'm just saying
Mm,
that very often I've had a lot of people, say, look, this was really easy to talk to me. Okay. Because and the thing with doing an interview is rather than a survey, if you like, is you listen for the nuance and
yep,
you drill down into what's really going on. And and for instance, I might just say to somebody, okay, if you had to give them a score out of 10 in this particular thing, and they say, oh, look, it's about a 7. Okay, what's missing? What would get them up to an 8 or a 9? And they say, oh, well, that thing I told you before, if they fix that.
yep.
Or somebody will say, I never give a 10. Okay, that's fine. All right, that's fine. But if you give them a 9, okay, why did you give them a 9? Is there something else that they could do?
Yep, yep, yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Fiona?
I was just going to quickly ask, because yeah, I think I like the concept of it. I think it's a good idea to have it as a third party. I do agree that I think they're more likely to give you, insights that you wouldn't be able to get by just, for us asking. We work with quite a lot of, I guess, some of them are quite large. How easy or hard do you find it to get them to agree to do the interview? Like, do you find it relatively easy because the way you're positioning it? Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, how do
Look,
you find just instigating
okay.
it?
Look, okay, the interesting thing is the more senior they are, the easier it is generally, which is ironic when you think about it. Okay, so the last lot I did for the environmental weather people, we wanted to talk to 10 people. I think I got hold of seven. 7 out of the 10.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. And the other thing that people say, oh, my clients are really busy and they won't talk to you. And I go, really? The average length of interview is 40 minutes to an hour. And these are senior people. I remember talking to the dean of the MBA school at Auckland University for over an hour, at the end of which he thanked me. And I said, what are you thanking me for? You took the time. Oh, no, I found this a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, that's good. No, yeah, I think no, I was just sort of interested generally because I think that sometimes we ask quite a lot of our clients, like they contribute to like case studies and they do reference calls, for us to other
Sure.
clients. And so I think they'll be quite receptive and there's something quite different. So yeah, I'm pretty interested to talk to you a little bit more about it.
Sure. Okay. We can have a conversation later on in the week or next week, whichever you prefer. And by all means, look, I'm happy to also do the 1 hour session. We just go through what you're actually doing. And that holds for you as well, Patrick, if you want me to do that.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I'm going to drop off now. Sorry, but
Okay,
great
no
session.
problem.
Thank you. We'll pick up the thread offline. Thanks.
All right, good. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rashid. No, it was very interesting. And yeah, hopefully we can just pick up the conversation post this call.
Okay, will do. I will give you a yell in the next day or so.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Fiona.
See you later.
Bye.